This is our second uh, attempt at a podcast for talking about people either in the insurance business and or have an interest in the insurance business and can bring something to the table there. So today we're talking with Anthony Snowell, and you'll be able to expand upon this. But basically, I know you're an IT expert. You've been involved in AI, you're a serial entrepreneur involved in different things. So I wonder if you could just, and he's the founder of a company which we'll be talking about, a company called Life Summary AI. And so I wonder, Anthony, if you could give me just a little bit of background on yourself, go back as far as you think makes sense, related to where you are today, and we'll start from there.
Yeah, so thanks for having me, Chuck. Well, if we want to go back, I got into the tech world when I was in college. So I luckily, majored in computer science, and I was a former college baseball player, and my athletic academic advisor had recommended that I try out computer science. And believe it or not, I had no idea what it was. I was of the engineering mind, but I wasn't exactly sure what computer science was. And what she said was, you can make a good living if things don't work out for baseball. And I was like, okay, sure, if I can make a good living doing this, it might be worth trying to pursue this type of major. At the time, I was a physics major, and we got into quantum theory, and I was sitting in class and I had no idea what they were talking about. And I was just like, I don't know if I'm, suited for this type of thing. And but yeah, I ended up pursuing computer science, and over time, I ended up having a passion for what it was. And I specialized in the development side of things, and ended up getting certified with Microsoft, um, uh, and then that's where my technological career started. And from an entrepreneurial standpoint, it started because at this time I was in my mid 20s, and my former coach had wanted me to create a system for for the baseball team. And he told me what they needed, and I was like, okay, yeah, I can build something like that. Now, Chuck, I had no interest in being an entrepreneur. I just, I was working for a consulting company at the time, and so I had a little bit of, real world experience under my belt. What he was asking for, I knew I can build pretty confidently, and so I built it. And it was so funny because he was so surprised that I built it. It was just, and in my mind, I'm like, well, dude, that's what I've been doing,
Yeah, yeah.
since I've been a professional, But yeah, I guess he just wasn't, he didn't know. But when I built it, I was taking him through what it was and how it worked and everything, and it suited the business, well, the use case for what he needed it for. But at the same time, he was like, hey, Ant, you can make a business out of this. And the light bulb went on, for me. And yeah, so after that system, was it was built a little bit specific to what his needs, but I ended up tinkering it a little bit to make it a little bit more generic. And yeah, I ended up uh, creating a company called My Sports Force. And about 17 months later, after that, I ended up selling it to a company in California. And I I got lucky. I mean, I didn't know, how to be an entrepreneur, but but it got the juices flowing. I made a little bit of money with that sell, but it got the juices flowing in me. And really from there, my second venture was really where I started to really understand what it meant to be an entrepreneur in the tech space, what it meant to scale, try to raise capital. I didn't need to raise for the first one. Probably sold it a little bit too early, but it was a learning process for me. And with all of that, Started a couple other ventures. Um, in 2017, I created a fantasy sport company called the Fantasy Market, and ended up selling that to a company called 10Bet. Um, and and then after that, started Granularity, and that didn't go the way that I wanted it to go, but it was a huge learning experience for me. So, so yeah, I mean, from a technological standpoint, started in college, and then from a business, entrepreneurial, it started with just, making that system for my coach.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, your background, starting with baseball. I mean, I love sports. Unlike you, I was very bad at sports. So, but I'm always looking for that connection. I mean, one of my first thoughts when you talk about AI and all this stuff is, I read Moneyball.
Hmm.
And I thought, man, it's data. Sports is data, right? You've
Yeah.
got all these opportunities to do things and to take get advantages. And then, interestingly enough, I had a panel discussion. We did a panel very early on when people were sort of, at least in the insurance industry, starting to pay attention to AI. We put together a panel, and one of the experts, who was like a professor at Northwestern, his background was working in NASCAR, or no, I
Oh,
don't know if
okay.
it was NASCAR, but racing. Well, NASCAR is the regular cars. I think it was the other one with the
F1.
F1, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Hmm.
And he was starting to apply AI things to build, to doing the race car, figure out, when in the pits when when you do things. So I don't know if that's a thing or if it's just a coincidence that the two people I've talked to who are experts at AI started with a sports angle. So
Yeah.
that's very interesting. Um, so given that background, and we're particularly talking about AI, when I started getting an interest in AI things was probably like a lot of people around February of 2024, about 3 months after ChatGPT came out.
Yeah.
It started, I started paying more attention. And before that, I was a nerd, sci-fi movies and stuff like that,
Hmm.
but nothing serious, right? So I was very interested in that, and the mind started to go as like all the different possibilities that you could do with this. I didn't really know anything, but I was on a mission to learn more, and I'm still on that mission. I'm probably falling farther behind as we go. So it's good to be talking to somebody like you. But when, given that you were in IT and probably paying more attention to this stuff, when did AI become a thing for you that you realized it was more than just maybe an interesting academic exercise, but something that could have applications? Was it about that time, or like you were probably paying attention to this a lot before that? When did that get triggered in terms of talking about AI?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's been around for a while. A lot of people that I talk to think, it kind of really got started, November 22, right?
Right,
And,
right.
it's been around, and I tell people Alexa, we've been using Alexa and some of the home appliance and, um, you know, uh, Echo and, all these things. That's all AI. But what changed the game was generative AI, and that's, like you mentioned, that was ChatGPT. But it's been out for a while. I didn't necessarily specialize in AI. I knew about it. I had read about it. Um, it was a growing technology, but it was somewhat limited. There and as you know, I mean, it takes a lot of compute. And back in the mid 2000s, when I started to kind of hear about it and read about it, the compute just wasn't where it needed to be for Gen AI to even be a thing. So, it was one of those, and then the training data. I mean, there's a lot of things that um, are the reason why it ended up coming out, when it did. But yeah, I would say around late 2000s, 2010, 2015, 2012, around that area is when I started to kind of it was on the radar, but I didn't necessarily specialize in it at the time. Mobile app development was taking off, and I would do some consulting for companies here and there, building back end applications. Like I would specialize in API development, back-end applications. I don't want to get too technical, but it's one of those things where at that time, most of the expertise, I should say, was being put into, that type of development, mobile app development, things of that nature. So yeah, it came on my radar around that time, roughly around 2010, 2011. But November 22, it changed the game. That was
Hmm.
it. That changed the game. So when ChatGPT was released, it was something that um, I remember using it, and I remember thinking like a traditional developer, like, man, there must be a lot of if-else statements in here. Like, how is this even possible? And as I used it, I realized that, yeah, this is not what's happening here. And generative AI, I didn't fully understand what it was or understand the concept. So the juices started flowing, and I had to really look into this. Now, at that time, I was building out granularity, so it was kind of like off time. What's this AI thing? What's this? Why is this ChatGPT thing so special? But once I really started to kind of bury myself in the technological side of generative I realized this was something special. And as we all know and hear in the news and talk about at the dinner parties, everyone's talking about AI, right? And yeah, it's going to change our lives. I was young when the internet came out and really got going, and for me, I say I missed the boat because I was just born a little too late, for me to understand the internet like in the early 90s when it really started, people
Hmm.
started to understand it. But, right now, it's perfect time because like I'm in tech, I understand the technology and I understand what it can do and some of the use cases, and the world is just now starting to use it even. So once you start using this technology, that's when the ideation starts, similar to like when the smartphone or the iPhone came out, right? At first, people were like, oh, this is cool, I have a phone and I can email people. That's great, it's awesome and it's colorful and all these types of things.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
once they started to really use it and really understood that they had a computer in their hand, really, and all the things that you can do with a computer, you could possibly do on this device. The ideation from the consumer side started, but by that time, people in the know, people in tech, had because they knew the technology and they knew all its capabilities, you were able to ideate and come up with some really cool ideas. And I feel that that's kind of where we're at with AI. Right now, it's still in its infancy. I've done some consulting work for companies, and they're just now starting to put together teams to understand it and use it. And believe it or not, there's not a lot of people that are using ChatGPT. And if they are using it, they're using it similar to how they use Google, where you're
Right.
just using it for a quick search to get some information. And that's great. It can do that, but you and I know it's much more than that. So it's still really in its infancy. And that's one of the reasons why I feel Life Summary is something that can be beneficial and useful to consumers for the simple fact that it's well, AI is at a point now where it's starting to become a little bit more accurate, um, and I think it's a perfect time to create this type of product. But also on the consumer side of things, people are starting to understand ChatGPT a little bit, just a little bit.
Hmm.
So a product like this is something that I feel that you know people aren't necessarily asking for this. Similar to when, they weren't asking for the iPhone, right? No one was like, "Oh, I wish I had a phone where I can have apps," and
Yeah.
no one was asking for that. But once they
Yeah.
got it in their
Takes
hand,
pictures, does all this stuff. Yeah.
right? Once they got it, they were like, "Oh yeah, I need this," right? And
Yeah.
that's kind of what I'm hoping to find out with Life Summary. It's one of those things where it's kind of like, you know, I I feel it's useful. I feel it's something that people need. I do know, people don't understand their insurance. People don't understand their legal documents. And when I say understand, I'm talking about the fine print. Just being able to ask your phone something about your own life documents and be able to get an answer in plain English that's not, legal jargon, and
Hmm.
be able to really understand information when you need to understand it. I think that's useful. So that's the problem. How you go about solving that problem, no one's asking for that. No
Yeah,
one's
yeah.
asking for it. But I
Well,
do feel
they
that
don't necessarily
this
know to ask the things
exactly. And that,
because I think one of the
yeah.
things, and I'd be interested in your take on this. One of the things I know in the insurance industry, just like you said, people are starting to pay attention. Insurance companies are saying, we got to do AI. We got to get it. A lot of them probably don't know what AI stands for even. And I get the feeling that a lot of companies that I talk to uh, say they say they're using AI because they want to look like they're
Mhm.
up on the cutting edge, and at most they're like you said they're using ChatGPT like a Google or something like that,
Yeah.
or they're doing automated calls and stuff where
Mhm.
people non-humans make calls and things like that, and it seems like there's just so that we're just scratching the surface. It seems like there's so much possible. So one of the things I wanted to ask you related to that is this is, like, sounds like a stupid, simple question, but exactly what is AI? When is a company really using AI? I mean, I think your application that you talked about, and I want you to describe that in a minute, but what makes something AI? I mean, if you go before, or like I talked about Moneyball and stuff. Well, that's just a big data and and predictive modelers and data scientists analyzing it and coming up with results. I've had actuaries tell me, "Oh, we've been doing that all along because we read giant data files and come up with results." But
Right.
that's not. It's hard to get into. That's not what AI is doing. AI is taking some of that burden off of you. How would you describe what AI really is?
Well, you had just given an example of the intelligence part. So if you really think about it, how I describe it very simply is just as it's a brain. Just think of a human that has a brain, and that brain is very knowledgeable on, well, if you look at large language models like ChatGPT, like Gemini, like Claude, they're knowledgeable on everything. you know so you and I, we have knowledges, we're very good with certain pieces, but not everything. We don't know everything. Well, that's in a sense artificial intelligence, right? So I have an intelligence when it comes to being able to develop and program, or hit a baseball or something like that. But my intelligence might be lacking when it comes to other aspects of life, or other sports or things of that nature, right? Well, that's the cool thing about artificial intelligence. It's basically intelligence, but the way that these models are trained, they're trained on so much data across so many industries when it comes to business, across so many, uh, you know, minute passions that we have as humans, um, that it becomes extremely intelligent on a wide, a vast amount of information, vast amount of interests, or knowledge. So, I mean, in a nutshell, that's what it is. And generative AI is slightly different. So the reason why generative AI was big was because now you can start to generate um, documents, or understand information, and create, um, or respond to something. So for instance, like, if you think about Alexa, Alexa it's AI, but what it was doing was really listening for certain keywords that you would say. So once it heard something, it would understand that, and then it would go and it would go and, from behind the scenes, it would go and call functions, or do set a calendar alert, things of that nature. Generative AI is basically being able to understand the meaning of, or the semantic meaning of what it is that you are asking it, or what it is you are, in a sense, talking about, but then generate a response that's coherent, that's intelligible in multiple languages. You know,
Hmm.
that's in a sense what it is. So there's AI, but then there's generative AI. You know, and that's what changed the game. That's why, we're all talking about this. That's why you see all this investor money flowing into
Yeah,
AI, because when generative AI was created, that's what, kind of really advanced artificial intelligence, to
yeah,
where we're at right now. Because it's been
yeah,
around for a very long time. Artificial intelligence has been around, but Gen AI changed the game.
yeah. It's kind of like I mean, I go way back farther than you do. I'm a lot older, so I started with punch cards and putting it in a
Yeah,
computer. And when the internet first started, it was kind of fun. It was interesting, but it was slow, so things had to get faster. And also, everything wasn't on the internet yet. The amazing thing to me about the internet as it moved along and where you are today, that on that smartphone, you basically have access to all the human knowledge that ever existed. I
yeah,
mean, for the most part,
right.
99.9% of it. And then the problem is that became overwhelming. And there's lots of bad information out there and lots of good information out there. And to me,
Mhm.
one of the beauties of AI is to help you access that, right? In a way that you have to sift through all this stuff. Well, AI, in some way that I can't completely understand, has access to all that and can boil it all down if they understand your question,
Right.
boil it all down and give you answers to stuff that basically is making use of all this information that we've put together, and that just fascinates me.
Yeah, and that's the training part of it. So, I try not to get very technical, but so when I describe training, if you really think about it, so I like to use the example of like a deep sea creature. There's a lot of, creatures and animals in the deep sea that we've never seen before, right? So just imagine if, I had 10 pictures, 10 photos of the same deep sea creature. And I was like, hey, Chuck, here's a photo. The first time I show it to you, you would be like, I'm not sure exactly what that is, right? And then if I told you, which is the labeling of that information or that data, and then I showed you a second picture, slightly different angle, same creature, and then a third picture, and then a fourth, and so on, right? Basically, what you are doing is training your model, which is your brain. So you have now trained your brain on this new deep sea creature. So that 11th picture that I show you of the 10 that you were trained on, you would say, oh, that is a sea creature, right? Whatever the name of it is, because your brain has now been trained on and it's similar to when we go to school and when we're learning a new language when as a baby. We're being trained on our environment, on our language, on letters, and that takes some time, right? Well, if you think about AI, that's what it is. So when you hear the term large language model or training, that's what's happening. So you need a lot of data to train a model, but once it's trained, it can then understand the meaning of what's being talked about, or the visual. So I could go to ChatGPT and I can upload a photo of uh, you know um, a baseball player and just say, what is this and who is this, and it would understand the meaning of the photo. It would be able to possibly, depending on the photo, depending on the angle, understand who's in the photo and have enough information to respond to me with the context and the meaning of the photo and who's in it and all that kind of stuff. I mean, now you have to have a lot of data to train this model or brain on to for that to happen. But over the years of the internet, that's exactly what has happened. We have a ton of data. They say data is the new oil, right?
Mm-hmm.
and the reason is because the more data you have, the more you can commoditize that, train models, use it for for insight for your business or whatever it is that you're using that data for. But going back to the AI, when you have a lot of data or a lot of images, or a lot of content, just in general, unstructured content, and you train a model on that, it becomes very, very smart. And it's really all math, without getting very technical. All When it comes to large language models like ChatGPT, all it's doing is predicting the next uh, token or the next set of words. That's all it's doing, and it's all
Hmm.
math. You know,
Hmm.
it's just prediction. But with that, for it to predict, you have to have a lot of sentences. It needs to be trained on a lot of sentences,
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
context for it
And
to
so
know what the next word is. The
and when
probability.
you yeah, and when you say predicting, there's probabilities involved, and that gets into the
Hmm.
whole people talking about hallucinations in AI, right?
Hmm.
And if it doesn't have enough data in it, the probability is 80%, maybe 20% of the time it'll give you an incorrect answer, which
That's
again
true.
ties into the patterns to me of the internet was compiling all this data, but it compiled good data and bad data, and people would find things on the internet and would, the old joke. Yeah. Or, I'd go to the doctor and I'd tell the doctor, hey, I read on the internet that this is the way you should treat me. He says, oh yeah,
Hmm.
that's a good idea to base your medical
Yeah.
treatment based on that. So there's a lot of parallels to that, and I know it's a lot of things that when you're doing this kind of work that you have to pay attention to you. So I have a lot of questions related to that, but let's start with why don't you give me a summary? I know you've talked a little bit about Life Summary AI. Uh, I looked on your starting website and stuff, and listen to the video. That addresses more than just insurance. I think,
Hmm.
right? Important documents and stuff. Obviously, insurance is probably a big, big, big part of that.
Hmm.
And interestingly enough, which is where I think the road into getting some response from the insurance business, that's the kind of thing actually in a manual way that insurance agents and financial planners and the people I deal with used to try to do manually, right? That I'll be your place where you can take all your important stuff and you'll be able to find it because
Hmm.
a lot of people are not very organized like me, and I can't find anything, right?
It's not just
And
you, Chuck. I mean, it's most of us.
yeah, yeah. And so talk
Actually,
about
87%, every
okay.
87% of us do not have a product like this.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, so it's just something that's a service that it's an interest to agents to be able to compile this. But I'm guessing, and you can tell me that you focused on this one area, which is taking all of your important documents and putting them together and having access to them and interpreting on them and finding them and explaining them and all that kind of stuff. What you're building with that seems to be underlying that. There's probably tons. I mean, even if you're focusing on insurance or the important, there's probably tons of applications, I would
mhm,
assume, that fit that whole framework of saying, yeah, I could use this in another context. Uh, that takes when you have tons of information that's very important, you have to understand and follow. Um, this you could build something that would take that information and put it in a format, train it, whatever you have to do, so that you can access that information like that and understand it. Is that true? Basically, that
yeah,
that you have lots of other applications, and as you get into this, are you going to be? I mean, you got your initial target with this, and obviously insurance is a part of that. But is that the kind of thing that at some point you'll be able to say, here's an engine, here's a tool that can take certain kinds of situations that people can say, I bet that would be a good application for Anthony's application. They may not
mhm,
understand. I mean, I picture all of this stuff whether it's the important documents, like one of the questions is, how do those important documents get into
Yeah.
what you're doing? I picture a big funnel and you're just dumping documents in the top and it gets interpreted and you
Yeah.
have all that and then you go through the training. But are you thinking in terms of this ultimately being a tool that could be used in all kinds of situations and circumstances?
Yeah, that's spot on, Chuck. That's spot on. And one of the things that I love about the idea, and one of the things that I've learned about, companies and startups, the more avenues that you have, the better. Because if one is just not doing exactly what you want it to do, maybe another one is, right? And that's one of the things I love about the idea. So, at its core, what Life Summary is, it's a platform. So we're setting out to allow individuals to take all the documents that we have around our house, in file cabinets, in our email. I mean, on our phones. We have all of these documents when, we have our insurance declaration, we have loan agreements, we have warranties that we got from going and getting our car fixed. We have bills, we
Mhm.
have uh, W-2s, we have our tax return, all of these documents, and they're all somewhere. I have a lot in my file cabinet, trust and will, all of these documents, I have some in my safe, some in my file cabinet. But to be honest, I don't really understand everything in those documents, And it's like, especially when it comes to insurance and, trust, will, insurance, I created so I'll start with insurance and then I'll migrate on and talk
Mhm.
about the trust and will. But on the insurance side, I, you need it, but how much do you need? Now, and I've learned a lot more work about insurance working with this product about my own insurance, and I'll give you some examples later. But you need it. You need auto insurance and home insurance, and maybe an umbrella policy. You're at the mercy of your agent. Like they're supposed to recommend what you need based off of several things, right? But if you don't have a good agent, you know, and that
Mhm.
agent might be out to just try to get you to have the most coverage so that they can,
Yeah.
you know, how do you know
Or they are not much better at understanding all those documents and being able to
that
find them
too?
than you are. And I mean, that's one of my pet things in
Yeah.
the insurance business. You got the company, the employees at the company, you got the agents and distributors, and you got the
Hmm.
consumers. Very often, I find when you talk about contracts, for example, understanding contracts,
Hmm.
the agents don't read those contracts or understand them. Even the
No.
people who work for the company. The only person, and I know this because I'm in the life insurance side and I'm responsible sometimes for drafting contracts and filing them. So I have to read them, right?
Hmm.
But when I deal with the distributors or the people in a company and they call me and say, well, somebody had a question about this, and I say, well, what's the contract say? And they go,
Hmm.
oh, really?
I
Where
don't
do I
know.
find? Where do? Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. Where do I find that?
Now, wouldn't it be great to be able to just bust out your phone and just ask Life Summary a question about
Right,
whatever your question is, right?
right.
And that's one of the things that we're setting out to do. So by having all these documents, and centralizing them in this private vault repository, it's going to allow consumers to do three things. The first thing is to have this information in a location to where it makes it a little bit easier for them to find, for loved ones to find. If something were to happen to me, my sister now would be able to go in and it just kind of know, what life coverage insurance I have, what type of, my bank accounts. So that way, how many people pass away and they have a couple grand in a bank account and nobody knows how to get it, didn't even know you had the account. I
We
mean, that
joke
stuff
about,
happens all the
yeah,
time, right?
we joke about in my family. My wife handles all the finances and all the
Hmm.
investments and stuff that I wouldn't be able to. We have money, but I wouldn't be able to find any of it. I mean, I don't
Right.
even know. I don't pay attention to what bank they're in or what financial
Hmm.
advisor, all that stuff. And then I worry about how, depending on who goes first, how are we going to find everybody all the passwords we have?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that too. And that's something that we do want to help out with in the future. So when we first
Yeah,
launch, that won't be in, but that's one of the things that we do want to help out, and we have some ideas around that. But so once again, the first thing is to help consumers with that. And the second thing that we want to do, and this is where generative AI comes into play, is to help individuals understand those documents. So if you have a really quick question about your interest rate, what is my interest rate on my car loan? What is my comp and collision coverage for my auto loan? What is how much coverage is my umbrella policy afford me or provide me, and when does it kick in? Like all these types of things that you might be talking to a friend, or you might be talking to your agent, or talking to someone, and you don't know that stuff off the top of your head, right? And that's the
right.
understanding of these documents, right? These are, kind of important documents. I
Yeah.
mean, how many times do you know, and this happened to me, because my daughter got into a wreck when she was 16, a small fender bender, nothing major, but you realize that you weren't covered for something and you thought you were, right? And it's like, well, I thought that I was cut. Well, yeah, you are, but because of this happened, that's why it's not going to, and those are the types of things that we just don't know, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it have been nice to be able to kind of have something that helps you understand your coverage a little bit more, what you're covered
Yeah.
for, what you're not? And then this kind of migrates into the third thing, which is by having all of these documents in one location. The third thing that Life Summary can do is it can help you understand how all of them together provide you with some type of summarization, and that's one of the reasons I came up with the name of your life, and make recommendations to you as to how you can decrease your insurance coverage, because you might have too much. You have a life insurance policy that's $1 million, and you have a homeowner's policy that covers certain things, and you have auto insurance policy that covers, and they overlap, and it's a lot. Now you're
Hmm.
paying for those little coverages, and you might not need it for your home. You just might need to have it on your auto. Or if you have an umbrella, so you might be able to go as low as you possibly can on home and auto, and then have your umbrella cover. So these are all things that this system can help answer for individuals, and people may not know to ask the system that question. If you do know, someone like you would know to what type of questions to ask, but some people would not know.
Right.
So
Right.
therefore, what the system's going to do is to push recommendations to individuals. So we see, based off of the documents that you have a 8.9% personal loan. Oh, by the way, since you have State Farm and you have this, one of our partners provides personal loans at 7.5%. Is this something that you may be interested in? This would just come to you via email or via push notification on your phone. You didn't ask the question. You didn't have to go searching anything. You just were delivered this information. But that information was delivered based off of your life information, based off of your documentation. And I feel that that would be something that's kind of useful. So that goes into what we had talked about, the different uses of the system. We want to start with insurance because I feel that insurance is something that's important, but it doesn't have a lot of like really personal information like your social security number. It doesn't have a lot of that. So people may be willing to upload those types of documents, get some really rich feedback, some really good summarization of the data, and find value add. I know one of the biggest hurdles that we'll have is trust. People being able to trust the system and make sure that it's secure. But then also, is the information accurate? You know, so so our first step is to kind of tackle insurance for that reason. But one of the things we can also do is we have ideas on the financial side. This is kind of going to be a little bit of a financial advisor too, a little bit of a financial advisor, a
Yeah.
little bit of an insurance agent, a little
Yeah, and
bit
there's
of
a lot of overlap there
estate
now. I mean,
planning. you know,
agents are becoming advisors, advisors are becoming insurance agents. So there's a lot of that
exactly,
going on, bringing that
exactly.
together. And one of the things, it's kind of interesting. The first, this is the second podcast we did like this, and one of the first I talked to an expert in health insurance and a reinsurance company in our first session, and the two conclusions we came to, because we were talking about how health insurance, and this could be applied to property casualty and auto and all that, but in health insurance, why does why do health insurers have such a bad reputation, right? They don't pay claims, and like you talked about, they don't know people don't know what's covered, what's not covered, and so I think, and we said, well, we don't have perfect solutions, but one of the solutions is transparency and bringing an understanding to clients, to customers about what is covered or what isn't covered, instead of what they imagine is covered.
Yeah,
And when I read about what you're doing, say, well, that's exactly what we were talking about. Like I said, I read life insurance contracts because I'm in life insurance. I don't read my health insurance contract. I don't read my auto insurance contract, all that stuff.
hmm
And I have a feeling that I don't read them, so I don't say first. But those a health insurance contract, for example, much more complicated
Oh man, they
than a
are.
life insurance contract.
Yeah,
Because for one thing, you make a bunch of claims in health insurance. You only make one claim on your life insurance.
yeah,
It's a little more straightforward about what's covered. Although there can be confusion about that too. But um, to have a tool that allows people to understand to go, they're not just calling some guy on the phone. He says, "Oh, that's not covered," or an agent who says it's not covered or may be covered. He doesn't probably know much better than you do. But to
right.
have a tool that has that information and that can create some transparency and trust
Mhm.
that they're getting the right information and maybe better understanding of what they're buying when they buy health insurance. And to your point about, you know, uh, evaluating that and saying maybe you need this kind of coverage to round out all your coverage is really valuable. But that brings me, because you talk a lot about, this is a consumer product for the consumer, the customer, all the people that have all this, individuals that have all this stuff. There'd be a real interest, I think, on the insurance side for
hmm
agents and advisors being able to
Yep.
provide this service to their clients because again, I think in a certain sense, back in the manual in the old days, that was one of the services they tried to provide. And again, for the reasons I just said, for the carriers, the insurance carriers, to be able to provide information that's in this format or in this
hmm
way to bring that to people because it's to their benefit to have people better understand. I mean, I guess if you're a crooked company or a crooked agent, maybe you don't want them to better understand.
right.
But I think most of them are really pretty honest. But the conclusion we came to in this health insurance podcast we did is the three-word uh, conclusion that we could have summarized it all by was to say insurance is complicated. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
it
super
is.
complicated. You
Yeah.
probably can't think of other consumer products that are just so difficult to follow and understand. So I think this is a really valuable thing. So I guess my question, have you thought about eventually maybe you don't go, I mean, I'm interested, for example, in the revenue model when you go to a customer. Are they
Yep.
going to pay a subscription
Yeah. So
for it?
yeah, you get it. You get it. Actually, that we do have a B2B play as well, you know, and we have just for the insurance industry. We're not talking about financial. We're not talking
Right.
about estate planning yet. But just for the insurance industry, we have three different approaches and three different product offerings. And those are the great thing is it's based off of our core system. So based on the core system, we can still provide those three product offerings to businesses in the insurance industry as well. So one of them is having the ability to provide apples to apples quotes. So for instance, if you wanted to shop your insurance, um, what's the first thing that an agent asks? Well, what's your comp and collision for auto? How much coverage do you have on this? How much and I don't know. I have to get my documents, and that could be a friction point for the agent, right? Because sometimes, if you're on the phone with an agent and you wanted to change coverage and just get a quote really quick, you'd then have to go home, most likely, because you don't have your documents on you. You have to go home, either send those documents, or you have to read them and explain what kind of coverage you have so that they can give you an apples to apples quote, right? Well, wouldn't it be cool to be able to have a system to where individuals could either email what they have, or or upload their existing documents, and then you can give them a quote like this, and it's an apples to apples quote, right? Because this type of system, what it does is it reads your documents for you, and that's the power of AI. It can
Hmm.
actually take a PDF and take the parts of it that we care about and read that, and then that's what it's going to be used to provide the quote to the individual, right? Based off of whatever you're looking. So if you have, life insurance, auto insurance, home insurance, all through State Farm, and you want to just check to see what, Allstate is, or American Family is going to be, how much, can you save if you can. You'd be able to upload all these documents, and then within maybe 30 seconds to a minute, you can get back an accurate quote. And then as a consumer, you'd be able to make a decision right there as to, okay, yeah, maybe this is something that I want to do because I'm saving $300 a month or $200 a month or whatever the case may be, right?
Yeah.
So that's one way. Another thing that we're on the business side of things, that we're thinking is, this product could be helpful in the customer service. Uh, you know, so I got this idea because my sister, she works in claims, injury claims for an insurance company, and she was using this system. And she was uploading some of her documents, and she knows this stuff really really well. She's like you. I mean, she was asking questions that most people, regular people like myself, would never ask the system. And I mean, Chuck, it was knocking it out of the park. And she started laughing, because she knows ChatGPT because her brother's
Hmm.
into AI, and all I do is talk about it and all that kind of stuff. But she doesn't really use it much. So the
Right.
fact that, based off of the documents that she had uploaded in the system and the questions that she was asking and the responses that were coming back, she was just like, I could use this at work. And the light bulb came on for me. I'm like, well, how? She said, well, when I'm on a call with an individual, she does accident claims. And, that individual may have other policies with their company, but at the moment, she's only looking at their auto insurance. And sometimes, based on the types of coverage, you may, you may be covered, or there's an overlap with some other coverage that you have, and that coverage may be with her company, or it may be with another company. You might have auto insurance with her company, but then State Farm might have your umbrella policy or some other policy for the overlap, right? So she what she said was, for me to be able to quickly, capture this information based on all the documents for this individual, it helps me with being able to respond in real time. Because what happens is she has to go and then read those documents, the other documents. She has to read them, understand them, and then she can go back and say, okay, so your coverage only goes up to 100 grand, but there's an overlap with this other coverage that you have, which is an additional 500. But she has to go through and understand that, right? And if she doesn't have it right in front of her, sometimes she has to go and call and, understand the document and get back. Or there's that, can I put you on hold for a minute or two so I can go and understand this document,
Hmm.
right? Being
Hmm.
able to ask a question really quick in real time and be able to get this type of information back to recite that to the customer is beneficial, and so that's another avenue that we're thinking about pursuing
Yeah.
as well.
I think that's really big because I mean, I know in working with insurance companies why I think carriers may want to provide this to their customers. And obviously, it'd be a different kind of revenue model. How do how would you do that? But one of the things in insurance is they're very concerned because it's so complicated. They're very, very concerned about their contracts and their stuff being misinterpreted. They want to have
Hmm.
some control over what information is being used in these models. Now,
Hmm.
it's fine if a customer signs up for puts all his products. Insurance company's not responsible for that, but they look at the legal responsibility of saying
Yeah.
anything the company provides or the company endorses or is involved in, they could
Right.
get sued, right? If it
Right.
says you're covered for this and they say you're not covered for this, guess who wins? The judge is going to go with saying, yeah, it's covered, pay it, insurance company, right?
Right. Yeah.
And
And those are the guardrails that you have to put up around AI. And that's a real, that's a real problem, right? A
yeah,
lot of companies know that they need to be using AI and they want to use it, but if it's not accurate, there could be lawsuits like you had mentioned, right?
right.
So,
But
there are
it's why they know
situations.
it's going to happen, but I think it's why they would like to be the ones to offer it to to customers because if they've got the right people helping them with it, they can ensure that the information is more accurate. I mean, the
Exactly.
internet got a lot of bad stuff out there that doesn't make any sense. And
Yeah, so that's the other thing too. Like our system is trained on your data. It's not necessarily trained on the outside world, right? So whenever you upload your life insurance policy or your auto declaration, that's the information that it's responding using. It's not
mhm,
responding using the outside internet stuff that it's been trained on. And that you can do that whenever you're programming these AI
yeah,
systems. You can
yeah,
tell them certain things and how to act and how to respond. And that's one of the things that I've been very adamant about myself and my team building this type of platform, making sure that it only responds based off of the information that's in the system for your account. And
yeah,
if it just can't come up with an idea, or it just doesn't have enough information to answer the question that you're asking, it will come back and tell you that.
yeah,
It'll say, based on the information that we have available, we can't answer that question. You may want to talk to your agent, right? So those are the things that that's kind of how you get around that, you know um
yeah,
that trying to basically telling someone what to do, right?
yeah.
It's
And
all
there's an
recommendations.
Yeah, and there's another aspect around it. I mean, it's true, I think, in a lot of businesses and industries, but again, insurance is the
Hmm.
terminology.
Yeah.
Uh, for example, in life insurance, you fill out an application, and there'll be this long list of, do you have any of these diseases?
Hmm.
And and there might be 15 things listed for cancer. Do you have cancer? But the word cancer doesn't show up anywhere because it
Hmm.
has to be very precise.
Hmm.
So when you go out and you ask somebody, like when you do an application, and they ask somebody, do you have what? I don't know the terminology either. I'm not the underwriter, but carcinoma, melanoma, this, and that. And the patient says, no, I don't have that. When they do have that, they just because the doctor just says you have cancer,
Yeah.
right? And so it's really critical, I think, and useful from the insurance company standpoint to have all this terminology, but they'll want to control it because anytime you define something,
Hmm.
that almost becomes a part of the contract, right? If you
Hmm.
tell somebody this means this and they go based on that, and that's not a precise answer,
Hmm.
uh, it can cause a lot of problem for the insurance company. So I think this is really valuable in help, and it's not good for the insurance company. Obviously, they answer they don't have cancer, they don't have this disease, they're not lying, they just don't know that that's what it's
Right.
called.
Right.
To have that kind of information available, whether it's for the consumer himself or for the insurance agent who's helping him fill out the application or the people in the home office, all of that kind of knowledge and building this just becomes extremely valuable. And I think I've described something that's probably a lot of work and
Hmm.
going to take a long time to get to that point. But I just see it as like an enormous opportunity for the
Yeah, and that's
insurance
one.
industry to be better understood.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that once again, I'm adamant about making sure that these responses come back in a way that is going to be beneficial for the consumers using this product. But then also, it's not telling someone what to do, you know. And there are guardrails that you can put up around this AI, to basically tell it to act like an agent. You are an insurance agent, right? And you're trained on certain standards. So for instance, if you were to hire an agent for State Farm probably has some type of process that agents go through, and they have to respond to their consumers based off of some type of standards. Well, the great thing is that these large language models are trained on those standards. Because they're public, public
Hmm.
information. So if you have a model that's trained on those standards, you can instruct the AI to respond with those standards in mind. So when it gives you an answer back, so we were talking about cancer or something like that, medical advice, right?
Hmm.
Coupled with your actual policy and the knowledge that the model has, being trained on a certain standard, it will respond similar to what an agent would respond. So if an agent, were to respond saying, well, we can't do this for cancer, then but we can do this, right? The model will respond in a very similar way, because just like that agent, the human agent, the model's trained on that same standard. And
Yep.
now this is the thing about AI. I mean, we all know, like, we forget some things sometimes. AI does not, right?
Yep.
So that's the thing. It can actually remember to respond in a certain way, or it doesn't have feelings. Maybe a human agent would say, yeah, my mom just passed away, and so this is what I'll tell you to do. What you can do is just do, because that human side of us comes in, right? The model won't do that. It's not trained to do that, right? So, there are some benefits to using this type of technology. And it's not perfect, right? Just like humans aren't perfect, right? There's
Yeah.
sometimes we still need humans, and that's the thing about these types of systems. They're not going to, like, AI itself isn't going to take the job of an insurance agent,
Right.
right? It's not going to take the job of a financial advisor. You still need human people, right?
Yeah.
But what it will do is augment their job. It will
Yeah.
help them maybe be able to capture information that they didn't even think about, right?
Yeah.
And then they can recite that to their consumers, right?
Yeah.
Um, and for the purposes of this type of product, it's like you get an insurance agent, you get a financial advisor, you get an estate planner for very cheap. Those individuals, can cost, in some
Right.
way.
Right.
So that's the thing. It's just like, a lot of people, you know, should they get an estate planner? Sure, but like, I grew up in outside of Pittsburgh, small town. The mindset's different. I don't know the statistics. Actually, I should probably look into it, but I would love to know, in the county that I grew up in, how many people have an estate plan. It's just a mindset thing. Like,
Right.
maybe the mindset is,
Or
I
just a
don't. That's for
financial
rich
estate.
people.
I mean, it's that
Rich people
estate
have
planning.
estate plans, right?
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, that's kind of true, right? The staple, but financial
Mhm.
plan, just in the more generic financial plan.
Even that,
There
right?
are a lot of
So this
people
system
that
could help with
absolutely
that,
need it. They absolutely need it, but in the current environment, they can't afford it. It doesn't make
right?
sense to hire a human. The other
Right.
thing that you said, which just makes a lot of sense to me, that I've often felt, is insurance agents, financial advisors have an impossible job.
Hmm.
They can't possibly know all
No.
the things they need to know
Yeah.
to service that person. So it's a perfect partnership. My feeling as the human, which is financial, should be the person who has the relationships,
Yeah.
who has the emotional response that can help people, look at this in terms of their needs on a emotional level, and that the part that they can't possibly manage themselves is handled by this AI assistant that
Yeah.
either the consumer has or the agent has or the agent provides it for the consumer to use that can
Hmm.
provide all this information because I thought, work with some financial advisors, I've worked with some financial advisors, and it amazes me that they're not sued on a weekly basis because not only is it impossible to know what the rules are now, but the rules keep changing on them
Changing. Yeah.
and tax laws and all the different issues involved uh, that they can't not possibly keep up on. Yet,
Yeah.
if they provide advice that's inconsistent or wrong, they're the ones that people are going to come after.
Right.
Uh, so I think there's enormous opportunity there as well. So that makes perfect sense to me that there's just a mother lode of opportunities in the insurance world. I think it'll be helpful to understand when you're at that point to understand, start to think about what your revenue model is. You do a subscription for an individual, what it might cost if an insurance agent wants to provide this for all of his customers, what it might
Hmm.
cost for the insurance company to provide it for all of his agents and or all of its customers, at different ways you can bring that. Because I think, with the right price points and stuff, that could be something that, just explodes in terms of an opportunity for you to bring this stuff to people. Because, you get one insurance company and all of a sudden you've got maybe hundreds of thousands of people that have access to your service, and that sale's a lot quicker and easier
Yeah, for
than
sure.
finding those 100,000 people and convincing them that they should do that. So that's really it's very cool, and this opportunity gets me excited. Where are you now? I know, like I saw on your website, it's like you can sign. I forget what it's called. You can sign
The
up
wait list. Yeah, we
the
have a
wait
wait
list,
list right
right?
now. Yeah.
Right. I see more and more of those these days as new founders, new
Yeah.
companies come up that they're out there with a wait list. What
Yeah.
is
So
your sort of time frame for being out to market on something like this?
yeah, so we do the wait list. Well, I'm doing the wait list because, like we had alluded to, earlier in the talk, one of the things that I mean, this is one of those ideas, when you're creating a startup, you want to solve an issue that is an issue, right? And they call it, finding a product market fit. And there's just no one's asking for this type of product, right? Because it's so new. People are still trying to wrap their head around AI and generative AI, ChatGPT. So no one's asking for a product like this, right? So as an entrepreneur, it's like no one's asking for this, but I think this could be useful, right? So and when you're going into those waters as an entrepreneur, it's a little scary because right now we're going to be a first mover. There's nobody doing this. And in every startup that I've ever created in the past, there was
Hmm.
always some competition, direct
Yep.
competitors, right?
Yep.
Sure, I do have indirect competitors for this idea, but we're going to be the first out with this. So it's either going to do great or it's going to do okay or it's just not going to do anything. But, that's the risk of
Yep.
being an entrepreneur. So in a long-winded way of answering your question, I'm doing a wait list just to see if there's some interest in this. you know,
Yeah.
we're doing a little bit of advertising here and there, explaining what this is. And if people sign up to the wait list, which we are getting some really, really good feedback, um, then it's something that makes me feel okay. Maybe I should go ahead and build
Yeah.
this. So that's why I
Yeah.
have a wait list. In the
Yeah. And
first place.
your point about nobody asking for this. I mean, I can think of that as like that's an age-old problem in innovation. There's
Yeah.
the quote from Henry Ford: "If I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses."
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And this
Right.
is exactly like you said with the iPhone. Nobody was
Yeah.
asking for all the things that an iPhone can do.
Yeah,
Uh,
nobody was asking for that, but once they used it, they were like, "Okay, I
right.
do need this, right?" So that's kind of what I'm hoping that I have here. So from a technological standpoint, we are in a private beta at the moment. So like I had mentioned, individuals in my family have used this product. Some of my friends have used this product. We are fine tuning some of the responses. So in AI applications, you measure in what's called accuracy scores. So we're trying to get this as accurate as it can possibly be, and right now we're in the 94% range, and I want to get to about 96%. So that's what's happening right now, and I'm adding more documents to this system. So I first started with insurance. I was about 96% accurate with the questions that I had around insurance, but then I started adding in documents for finance, bills, warranties. I mean, my plan is to have is whatever you want to put in this thing, the more you have, the better it's going to give you a summary of your life and provide you with
Yeah.
some really, really good recommendations and reminders even, right? But going back to the accuracy thing, the more documents I put in, it gets a point or two less accurate. So I just want to get that accuracy back up to 96%, accurate.
Hmm.
Of course, we all want to shoot for 100% accuracy, but even humans aren't 100%
Right,
accurate
right,
at
right.
all the
96,
time.
96 is going to be a big improvement over humans.
So once we get to that 96 for all of the documents, then I'm going to go into a public beta. So that will probably be by the end of next month, August, by the end of August of this year. So I'm very excited about that. So right now we're actually working on the development of the user interface that individuals will log into to conduct the public beta. I'm also working on the back end piece for the partnerships with businesses as well. So I built the platform in a way to where businesses with their existing system can integrate with our back end and use this engine, this AI engine for documents that they may have or private vaults that they may provide those consumers. Right now, and legally, I don't really. So I probably couldn't say the name, but I'm just not
Go.
gonna, just in
Yeah.
case. But
Hmm.
right now we're working with two very big companies that are very interested in our solution for their suite of features and their for their application. And they are in the private security of human data or consumer data side, of things. And they have
Hmm.
what's called a private vault. But right now, you can put your passport, your driver's license, and stuff like that in. But it's people are using it, but it's not very interactive. It's not doing much.
Is
Whereas
the
if you were to
vault
put that same
where you're referring to where the data goes? Like you have
Yeah,
all these
that would
documents.
be yeah. If you think of it like if I upload my passport to some location, I now have access to my passport anywhere that I have internet access, just in case I ever lose it. A lot of people will keep it on their phone too, but what if you lose your phone on vacation in the ocean, right? What happens?
Yeah.
Uh-oh, my passport, and then maybe you had a bad day and someone took your passport out of your bag on the beach while you were in the ocean and lost your phone, right?
Right. Right.
So people actually use these type of private vaults, but the thing about it is they're not very interactive. They're just really something that you can log into to get your data. Whereas with Life Summary, what we plan to do is to push you a recommendation saying, "Hey, your passport expires in 60 days. Would you, click this link to renew it?" Or your driver's license is about to expire, or I live in Arizona, the state of Arizona is changing their driver's license, and the person might not know this information, and they can be sent a notification or an email, because our system will interact with state, public state sites and third party companies, and to be honest, Chuck, I don't have all of that thought out yet. And the reason is just because there are so many possibilities with this application. We've thought out enough to really get going, but I know that once we scale and we get out there, we're just gonna and we work with people, businesses, consumers. We're gonna just get so many more ideas and so many more integrations and partnerships that'll just benefit the consumers
Yeah.
using the application. So make a long story short, we have some partners that are thinking about using our back end system, and I'm getting that ready as well so that they can integrate and then we
Yeah,
can provide them with the AI
yeah,
functionality.
yeah. Now, I don't want to get into the weeds too much on this, but one of the things I think about when I think about your stuff, I mean, we're talking about lots of information, lots of documents. Without, trying to get too detailed, how hard or easy is it going to be to get all this information into a vault?
Yep. That's another hurdle. That's another hurdle. So the security is one. The other hurdle is getting individuals to actually take the time to do this. So,
But what would
you
they
know,
have to do? What would they have to do to get it in? I mean, is it
yeah,
something
so
you have a
most of these
tool that they,
documents, yeah, most of these documents nowadays are in PDF format. So I actually just changed my insurance 2 months ago, and everything came via PDF. So I can just take the PDF, upload it. But what we do plan to do in the future is create connectors, for individuals. So you'll be able to connect to your Dropbox account or your Google account or Microsoft account and point to the folder that has your documents and it will automatically ingest those documents into our system. Um, we're thinking about having tools that you like browser extensions or tools that you can install on your browser that will check your email for certain documents and then ingest those if that's something that you feel comfortable doing. Um, you can take a picture. So once we build our mobile app, you'll be able to take a picture of a document and then that will be ingested into the system. I mean, so we want to try to make it well for insurance companies. I'm actually talking to a company right now where you'll be able to during the onboarding process of our application, you'll be able to log into your insurance carrier, select whichever insurance carrier you have, and it will ingest your documents that way. So that way you don't have to do the uploading. So that's one of the things that I know it's a problem, but we're going to try to provide as many solutions as we can
yeah.
possibly think of
Well,
that
that's the
help
funnel.
people more
That's when
easily get this
yeah,
information in, right?
yeah, that's the funnel I was thinking of at the beginning. How does it, I picture this funnel putting all this data in the top and it gets through and you say ingested. That's a good word. I like that word.
Yeah,
Ingested and evaluated and that seems like a critical component. So that makes
yeah,
perfect sense. And I think we're probably getting close. I don't want to take advantage of your time too much, but like we haven't even scratched the surface on some of the uses that I've come
yeah.
even just in the insurance world. I mean, I think
Well,
insurance
let's
agents
talk. Yeah,
need,
let's talk,
yeah,
Chuck. Yeah,
insurance. Well, insurance agents are going to need. They've all the companies offer all these products from different carriers and stuff. Even forget about just the contract itself, but all the sales material, all the criteria to qualify for one product versus another product, and what each product offers, and all that stuff. They need help ingesting all of that,
yeah,
right? And providing that information, and it makes them so much more efficient. That's good.
yeah,
But I guess I'll close with one last question. Could be a open question, a big question, depending on what you have. Is there anything else we haven't talked about with what you're doing, what AI can do that you would like to sort of close with in terms of um, what the possibilities are or what you're going to offer with your particular products, anything of that nature.
yeah. So I'll answer your question with a question. After understanding what um, after listening, I should say, to what this idea is, do you have any questions about it? Do you understand conceptually what this is, and do you think it's usable, or do you think this is something that will help people?
Yeah, once you address all the roadblocks to get there,
Hmm.
having this available is, I think, enormous and something that certainly consumers would want. Now, consumers are kind of funny people in insurance. They like to take their insurance policy and forget about it, not do anything with it. But
Hmm.
having this available is going to be huge when they come to the point like we just had a hailstorm.
Exactly.
What's covered? Am I going to be able to get my roof and to get that answer
Hmm.
right away? And again, if the trust level is as a check on what your agent tells you,
Hmm.
because not that they're necessarily lying, but they don't necessarily
Yeah.
know either.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, I think that's huge, and I think again all the but in very, very general terms, anytime you have to provide a lot of complicated information and understand it for any purpose, this is a tool that makes sense for that. And it's a really, to me, a valuable uh, use of AI. I'm sure I know there's tons of other things with AI where you have to hire 800 data scientists and all this stuff to work through it. This other guy I talked to, was sort of into those huge projects. But this seems almost, I don't mean it's low hanging fruit like what you're doing is easy, but it's low hanging fruit in that even though they're not asking for it, it's going to click. People are going to understand why, whether it's consumers or people in industry, are going to understand why this is valuable because they deals with the problems of this all the time.
Yeah, and I'm
So yeah,
seeing that with our wait list, our wait list uh, aggregation of individuals on the wait list. I'm seeing this. Yeah. So yeah. So if that's the case, then no, I don't really have any questions. But that sparked my mind about something that I just came up with this a week ago. So one of the things that I found out in my insurance, my auto insurance, is that if I were to drive to Mexico, I'm not covered. And that's the thing. Like living here in Scottsdale, people go to vacation in Rocky Point all often. It's one of those things where it's just kind of like a lot of people own homes down there. And if I were to drive down there, which is about a little over 2 hours away, I'm not covered by that. And, after I thought about it, I was like, yeah, I guess that makes sense. It's a totally different country. But so many people drive down the Rocky Point that you just might not even think about it, right?
right, right,
And
and
right in the fine print detail of my auto insurance policy, it stated that. So, and I found that out just because I didn't know much about my auto insurance policy either, to be
right, right.
honest, until I started using this system. But wouldn't it be great to if after you had the mobile app on your phone, we knew like we know you're going to Mexico on vacation with your family. Wouldn't it be great to get an alert saying, hey, by the way, we think you're going to Mexico sometime in the near future. Do you know that if you drive, you're not covered? That would
Right.
be kind of one
And there
cool
could be a
use
laundry
case
list
with
of
the
other
system
insurance
of
issues
other things. Yeah, that's just one
that
that
you
I
have to
came
have.
up with, right?
Yeah, and that triggered
So
a thought in my mind that was just it's always been a very common all the way since I started driving. Are you covered if you lend your car to somebody to drive
yeah, that,
and they get in an accident? And
yeah,
you think about it at the time and say, I'm not going to worry about it here, take the car.
right.
But if it's something that really simple, and I honestly, and I'm sure it varies from company to company and who you're
It
lending it
does.
to,
Yeah.
that becomes an issue. So that yeah, there are all kinds of things. If you get people, if you get to the ideal is you have all these people using this, and they get in the habit of checking your app. I
Yeah.
mean, sometimes you can push information,
Hmm.
but if you say, well, I'm thinking about doing this, I wonder what I need to worry about
Yeah.
insurance wise or whatever
Or
before
or
I do
you're
that.
you're you're at lunch with a buddy and they're explaining that, oh, my kid got into a wreck and I end up finding out that fender benders that happen this way aren't covered. You might think, well, you know what? I wonder if my kid gets in a wreck, or am
Hmm.
I covered? Well, you'd be able to take out your app, ask the question, and then it'll come back and give you the answer to that question based off of your auto policy that's in the system, right? So it's just little things like that, like there's times when, so warranties is another thing, and I just came about the whole warranty thing. So here in Arizona, batteries go dead every 2 years, car batteries, because it's so hot here, right? It's one of the problems that we all have. Now, a lot of battery makers, they have a warranty that if the battery goes dead within 2 years, sometimes three, you get a free battery. Well, I mean, sometimes, I remembered that one, but if you get a part on a car and it has a 3-year warranty, these types of things you might forget. Like,
Sure.
2 years in, you forget that you even have the warranty in the first place, right? So wouldn't it be great as you're going in to get your car fixed or something? Do I have any warranties on my car at the moment?
Yeah.
And it just
Yeah, or
comes
if you're
back and it
selling
tells
the
you.
car, if you're selling the car, are these transferable? So
Yeah,
can I tell the person I'm selling to, hey, this is a really good deal because you're going to have this covered. I just changed this part and it's going to be covered for 4 years to know
yeah,
that in fact that's true.
yeah.
I mean, there's tons of stuff like
Based
that.
off
So
of
yeah,
your policy, right? And that once again, I keep saying that because that's the important piece, based off
yeah,
of your specific policy,
right,
right?
right.
So yeah, to
Yeah,
me, I think that would be beneficial.
I think one of the biggest problems, and you probably addressed this already, one of the biggest problems you're going to have is there are just so many areas and things that you could take this to and start to develop that it's going
Yeah,
to be
we
hard.
think so as
It's
well. Yeah,
trying to focus on,
yeah,
okay, I got to get this out and then I'm going
yeah,
to get this out and get this out
yeah,
because like I said, I mean, I don't even know the details and nuances of everything you're doing, but I could come up with a dozen things
yeah,
that in the insurance business at least, and maybe even other things that you deal with day to day, that this would be valuable for. So I
yeah,
really
Chuck. And I have a list.
appreciate this
Yeah,
conversation.
I have a list as well. So that's one of the things that I love about this idea.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we're getting on how much time are we? We're getting almost an hour and a half here, so it went by fast. And like I said, there's a multitude of different areas that we could get into and get into the weeds on and spend a lot more time. But I think this gives a flavor of what you're doing. And we're going to try to put this out to, obviously my LinkedIn uh, contacts are all people in the insurance business. So hopefully we get some action out of that. I
Yeah.
think talked to my son Dan that you've worked with
Hmm.
that about our, one of the places I'm going to see if they're interested in this is the Intercompany Marketing Group, which is
Yeah.
one of the networking groups for insurance that I'm going to provide this video too for them to get that because I think there's a lot of people at different levels, company people, distributors, and that could find have an interest in this and want to learn more. So I hope it gets going because I think it's a really valuable type of product that you're working on. So
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate the compliment. And then also one thing about your son is, I'm a parent. I have two kids. I've worked with Dan, and I now know Dan for some years, and kudos to you, for raising that man. He's a great person, and from a professional standpoint, I'm going after him from a marketing standpoint. So, and
I'm sure he'll be happy.
I'm talked to him already. He's doing some other things, but yeah, he's just really, really good at what he does. And, it just, so hopefully this is something that he'd be interested in
Yeah,
joining,
well, the beauty of what
someday
you're
in the future.
doing, the beauty of what you're doing, and with what Dan does, some of the stuff that I've been involved in, is there are so many potential synergies of
Hmm.
oh, he's doing something there. I bet I could use this over here
Hmm.
and figure out a way to make that work. So it creates a lot of opportunities. So that's great. So again,
Yeah.
thanks, and
Thank you very
I'm
much
sure
for the time,
she'll be
Chuck.
talking again soon. Good to see you.
All right. Have a good one.
Bye bye. Bye.